Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. In this session we'll be discussing from the first verse of the 6th chapter of the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam. Beginning from this session, we are starting a new chapter, chapter 6 of the first canto. This chapter is entitled Conversation between Narada and Vyasa Deva. The previous chapter was Narada instructs Vyasa Deva about Srimad Bhagavatam. So the concluding verse of the previous chapter was that Narada finally concluded the chapter by telling Vyasadeva to describe the transcendental activities of Supreme Lord for the good of all classes of people, for everyone's good. And that's the only way to mitigate the material miseries in which people are suffering in this world. So now the conversation will be taken further, where Vyasadeva makes some very important inquiries from Narada, so that Narada will reveal more about how he made progress after he got initiation from the Bhakti Vedantas. So this is the opening verse of this 6th chapter. Suta Uvacha Evam Nishamya Bhagavan Devarsher Janma Karmacha Bhuya Papracha Tam Brahman Vyasa Satyavati Sutaha. Now, Suta Goswami is describing to the sages of Naimisharanya this particular background for the Bhagavatam. How is it that Vyasadeva got inspiration to compile the Bhagavatam? That was a question asked by the sages, and Suta Goswami is explaining that. So he's telling, in this verse, Suta Goswami is telling, O Brahmanas, he's addressing the sages of Naimisharanya, thus hearing all about Sri Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God, Bhagavan, the incarnation of God, and son of Satyavati, Satyavati Sutaha, inquired as follows. Bhuyaha Papracha. He was already inquiring, now he made further inquiries. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives a brief description about the contents of this chapter. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, Vyasadeva was further inquisitive to know about the perfection of Naraji, and therefore he wanted to know about him more and more. In this chapter, Naraji will describe how he was able to have a brief audience with the Lord, Supreme Lord, while he was absorbed in the transcendental thought of separation from the Lord, and when it was very painful for him. So, a disciple should be inquisitive. A disciple should inquire from his spiritual master and should inquire about relevant things. So here the relevant question is raised about the perfection of Narada. How was it achieved after he got initiated? Already Narada has described about his previous life, the birth and activities, till the stage he was able to get initiated, and the confidential knowledge about the personality of Godhead was revealed to him by the Bhakti Vedantas. And he was endowed with spiritual opulences and with the understanding about the confidential understanding about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now Narada is going to describe to Vyasadeva, based on Vyasadeva's inquiry, how Narada was able to have a brief audience with the Supreme Lord. And it happened when he was completely absorbed in transcendental thought of separation from the Lord. Now this will be described by Narada. The second verse of this chapter, Vyasa Uvacha. Now Vyasa's inquiry is being described by Suta Goswami. What did Vyasa inquire? Bhikshubhir vipravasite vijnana adeshtrabhistava vartamano vayasyadye tata kim akarod bhavan. The meaning of this verse is, Vyasadeva said, Vyasadeva is inquiring from Narada, what did you do after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in scientific transcendental knowledge before the beginning of your present birth? How did this change happen? That is exactly what Vyasadeva wants to understand in the life of Narada, from the previous life, previous birth, to the present life, present birth. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says something very important for all of us. Vyasadeva himself was the disciple of Narada, and therefore it was natural for Vyasadeva to be anxious to hear what Narada did after initiation from the spiritual masters. Why did Vyasadeva make this inquiry? Because Srila Prabhupada says he wanted to follow in Narada's footsteps in order to attain to the same perfect stage of life. Narada has achieved the perfection of spiritual life. So, Vyasadeva is inquiring from Narada, what did you do after initiation? Exactly. Before you got your present spiritual body. This desire to inquire from the spiritual master is an essential factor to the progressive path. This process is technically known as Saddharma Pricha. This is described, Prabhupada is describing from the Nectar of Devotion, where Srila Rupa Goswami explains what are the steps to be taken in executing sadhana bhakti for a beginner in practice of pure devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. one of the steps is that one has to inquire from the spiritual master. Make proper inquiries. In the Bhagavad Gita also this is told, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Approach a bona fide spiritual master, surrender to him, pranipatena, and inquire from him. Pariprashnena. But in what mood the inquiry should be done? A sevaya, in a humble mood, by rendering proper service to the spiritual master. Inquiries with submission and service attitude is required from the spiritual master. In the third verse of this chapter, Vyasadeva further inquires from Narada, Swayambhuva kaya vritya vartitam te param vayah katham chedam udasrakshi kale prapte kalevaram. The meaning of this verse is, O son of Brahma, Narada is taken birth in this life as a son of Brahma. That's why he's called Swayambhuva, son of Swayambhu, son of Brahma. How did you pass your life after initiation? And how did you attain this body, having quit your old one in due course? See, how did this change of body take place? What happened? That you're born in a previous life as a son of an ordinary maidservant. Okay, you executed spiritual life, but how did a change of body take place to your present body, which is an eternal body? So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Sri Narad Muni in his previous life was just an ordinary maidservant's son. So how he became so perfectly transformed into the spiritual body of eternal life, bliss and knowledge is certainly important. How did this transformation take place? Bhagavad Gita says our body is changing always. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. We all experience as spirit soul, the body which is different from the spirit, the material body is changing from childhood to youth to old age. Similarly, the body changes at death. Of this there is no doubt. Everybody changes their body even at the time of death. Tatha dehantara praptihi. But the significant question here is not whether the change of body has happened or not. It is about how he became so perfectly transformed into the spiritual body of eternal life, bliss and knowledge. That is the important question being raised here. That is not going to happen just like that. Change from a material body to a spiritual one is not going to happen easily. It doesn't happen automatically. So how did this change happen? That's precisely the question that Vyasadeva is asking from his spiritual master Narada Muni. Sri Vyasadeva desired that Narada disclose the facts for everyone's satisfaction. It's very important to learn from the life of Narada. How did Narada Muni get the spiritual body in this life when he had a ordinary material body in his previous life, like any of us? most insignificant parentage. He was born as in the previous life as the son of an insignificant maid servant. But some changes happened, and those changes are important to hear about from first hand from Narada Muni himself. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.